Brandon, and for the past week, I've been living my life like I'm straight out of the early 2000s. Now I know what you're thinking, but the 2000s were just yesterday. Well, if you can believe it, the year 2000 is old enough to vote, it's old enough to drink, and it's already got a discount on car insurance. Yeah, the 2000s started over a quarter of a century ago. Feel old yet? Well, you probably didn't back then, and neither did I. But I should probably rewind to when this all started. It's December 31st, 1999. The Y2K scare was in full effect, and as we rolled into the new millennium, the world was holding its collective breath. We were told that because of Y2K, the clocks would reset, the power grids would fail, and the digital world as we knew it would simply disappear.
On New Year's Day, 2000,
the end of the world as we know it.
Wake-up call is now.
What are we doing on New Year's Eve?
Y2K may be God's answer. This is not one of the summer movies where you can close your eyes during the scary part.
Today, no one is laughing.
In helping to prepare America for Y2K.
We're probably just gonna chill with the family in case the world ends.
Now it'll be about 10 minutes till the ball drop, and you can feel it in the air. There's a buzz.
But as the ball dropped, the lights stayed on and the celebrations continued. The world as we knew it wasn't going away, and the technology that we were afraid would fail us was about to take over everything. When the year 2000 hit, I was entering my prime teenage years, that perfect age of wanting to feel independent but also desperately trying to fit in and pretty much being influenced by anything. Now, while I was experiencing rapid changes due to puberty, the world was experiencing some rapid changes of its own. In the previous decade, information was still firmly rooted in traditional mediums like television and print, but in the year 2000, we almost got immediate access due to the advance of technology. In the 90s, the internet was just a guest, but in the 2000s, it was moving in. Now, if you think about the differences in time, year 2000 was 26 years ago. Now, if you think about 26 years ago from the year 2000, that was 1974. That's pretty wild. But why does it feel like the year 2000 was just yesterday? I mean, is it really all that different than today? Well, I'm about to find out because for the next week, I'm gonna be living my life like I'm a man straight from the early 2000s. Now, I'm not gonna be concentrating on politics or the economy, but instead, I'm gonna be embracing the pop culture, the cars, the fashion, and maybe even reconnecting with some old friends we may have forgotten along the way. So I hope you're ready because we're about to travel back in time to the year 2000.
In the year 2000.
The year 2000, the PS2 was just released and CDs were still the go-to way to listen to your favorite music. Gladiator and American Psycho hit theaters and shows like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, ER, and Survivor dominate TV. While girls are obsessed with Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, Eminem releases the Marshall Mathers LP. But as a teenager, I leaned into the rise of nu metal, blasting Limp Bizkit and Korn, discovering new music through Total Request Live, and staying up late watching South Park. It was a time of discovery, of trying to find my own personal identity shaped by an ever-growing influence of media. So the goal is to live like someone from the 2000s, and although it feels like times weren't really that different back then, it was still very similar to what you'd find in the late 90s, which is perfect because I still have some of the old gear from back then, where I did a video where I lived as a 1990s man. The CRT TV, the VCR, the desktop computer, so thankfully I have a bit of a head start. But there's one really important thing I need to do to start this challenge, and that is to look like I'm from the era. And for me, like most teens at the time, MTV was a critical window into what was actually considered fashionable. The early to mid-90s were all about grunge, anti-fashion, but the 2000s flipped that on its head. The term metrosexual may have been coined back in 1994 by British journalist Mark Simpson, but in the early 2000s, it exploded. Suddenly it wasn't about not caring how you looked, but it was about engineering a look. And some of the styles you might remember, like the overstyled chaos of the David Beckham faux hawk, the frosted spikes made famous by Justin Timberlake, maybe more the shag style, or you went the complete opposite direction, ultra clean, buzzed, like Channing Tatum or Vin Diesel. Whatever you chose, it had to be intentional, and if you had hair, you needed enough gel to withstand a Category 5 hurricane. Something I remember very well that most kids my age were emulating was definitely Eminem. The Marshall Mathers LP dropped in May 2000. It sold 1.7 million copies in its first week, and it quickly became the fastest selling hip-hop album. Eminem was everywhere. So that was the look I was inspired by. Now, going along with the metrosexual makeover, it's time for some facial hair. And in the early 2000s, it was an exercise in geometry. Full beards weren't quite as popular back then. It was all about landscaping. Some common facial hair was the soul patch, that tiny lonely triangle under the lip. Or if you really had the patience, you went for the chin strap, a beard so impossibly thin it looked like it was drawn on with a Sharpie. It was also the era of the goatee and the pencil-thin sideburns, and since the goatee was arguably the most popular at the time, that's the look I went for. And I might have been inspired by Eminem to begin with the hair, but after doing the facial hair, I definitely given off some Fred Durst vibes. I look like a rock band reject from the 2000s. But now that I got the first step done, it's time for the close. Hey, if you're liking this video so far, please consider checking out our fitness app called Buff. It's an app me and my brother have been designing for the last 3 years. And this isn't just some cookie cutter template, it's been handcrafted. And it's drawn a lot of inspiration from old school RPG games. So there's a leveling up system, gaining experience points after each workout. You have your own personal stats, there's a ton of different exercise tutorials, there's a lot of different programs to fit your specific needs in the gym. So if you're liking this kind of content and want to show us some support, definitely check out the Buff app on Google Play or the Apple App Store. All right, back to the 2000s. Fashion in the early 2000s was still hanging on to the late 90s, and if you ask millennials today, they'll tell you it was simple. Everything was baggy, something the current generation is following. But like most things in that decade, it evolved fast. To make sense of it, I broke the 2000s fashion into 5 phases. From 2000 to 2002, it was oversized everything. The skater look, baggy jeans pulling over chunky skate shoes. By the mid-2000s, that started shifting. Abercrombie & Fitch and American Eagle dominated the malls. Layered polos, distressed denim, graphic tees, and at the same time there was a harder edge. Affliction, Ed Hardy, heavy graphics, rhinestones, and MMA-inspired tees. And by the late 2000s, something unexpected started to creep in. Slim fits. The era of baggy was slowly giving way to something more tailored. So now that I got the look down, it's time to start living like I'm from the 2000s. Just imagine waking up and it's still the early 2000s. You're in your mid-teens and there's no phone to immediately start scrolling on social media. No bills, no responsibility. The world feels simple. We're back.
March 4th, 2001, and I just have to show something off real quick. I finally got my hands on a PS2. Check it out. Oh yeah, there it is. PS2. Oh. So it is the weekend. I'm gonna be booting this up and playing it all day.
By 2001, gaming wasn't just a hobby anymore, it was becoming a culture. The PlayStation 2 launched in 2000, and by 2001, it had already shipped over 20 million units worldwide. But it wasn't just a console, it was a DVD player. At a time when DVD players alone cost hundreds of dollars, the PS2 became the most affordable way to upgrade your living room. And then in October 2001, Grand Theft Auto 3 releases. GTA 3 didn't just sell millions, it changed what games could be. A fully open 3D city, complete freedom, and controversy on the news.
Grand Theft Auto 3 may have given our generation of adults something new to worry about.
And a particularly big hit with teenage boys.
Suddenly, gaming felt adult. And you saw games like Metal Gear Solid 2 pushing cinematic storytelling, Gran Turismo 3 making realism a benchmark, and Final Fantasy X bringing voice acting into the mainstream. But then, Microsoft launches the Xbox on November 15th, 2001. It's bigger, heavier, and unapologetically American. Halo Combat Evolved launches with it. System link parties, 4 TVs, miles of Ethernet cable running through basements. Multiplayer doesn't feel like an afterthought anymore. It feels like the future. And Nintendo answers with the Gamecube. Compact, purple, built like a toy but hiding some of the tightest gameplay ever made. Super Smash Bros. Melee becomes a dorm room staple. With games like Mario Sunshine and Luigi's Mansion, Nintendo might have been less gritty and more colorful, but it showed these 3 companies had 3 completely different visions. But all would have to agree that these were legendary consoles. Funny enough, I didn't own a PS2 back then. Even a year after launch, the PS2s were pretty hard to find, and me and my brother were diehard Nintendo fans. So on November 18th, 2001, we woke up at 5 a.m. and drove 45 minutes to our local Walmart to pick up the GameCube. Once we made it home, we booted up Rogue Squadron and Monkey Ball, and I was blown away by the graphics. At that time, consoles were still making these massive leaps. It felt like the future arriving overnight. But there was this aura around the PS2 and Xbox being more adult, and being in my mid-teens, that's exactly what I wanted to experience. But thankfully, consoles weren't the only way to experience that. PC gaming was the other way. With games like Counter-Strike, The Sims, and Call of Duty, if you weren't gaming on PC, you felt like you were missing out. And there was one game in particular me and my brother spent countless hours playing, and that was Diablo 2. Diablo 2 was released in June of 2000 and sold over 1 million copies in the first 2 weeks, becoming one of the most played online games of the era, and defining the ARPG genre. But as 2004 hit, we started migrating to a different world entirely. World of Warcraft. And this is one of the first copies. Me and my brother actually won this by entering a costume contest Blizzard put on at the time, and you have to remember, these were the days before professional cosplayers, so it was just a bunch of normal kids entering it, but I did have an edge over the competition because I was heavily into movie special effects at the time, so I stayed up all night sculpting, casting, and painting a custom orc latex mask. And I have to say, after booting this up, it was definitely worth it. Little did we know WoW would become a cultural phenomenon with over 12 million active subscribers at its peak. This wasn't just a game, it was a second life, a digital economy where people spent more time working in Azeroth than they did in their actual offices. Some started valuing their digital stats as much as their real-world ones. The line was starting to blur. The 2000s was the decade where we learned that you didn't have to leave your bedroom to go on a journey that felt real. But if you did leave your bedroom, you needed something to get you there. Looks like I need to find a car. In the 90s, you would see cars that were rounded, sensible, and more fuel efficient.
Because under Aerostar's exterior is a truly versatile minivan.
But the 2000s injected new life into car culture for an entire generation. While street racing games like Need for Speed, Underground, and Burnout 3 Takedown let players build outrageous custom cars and tear through neon-lit city streets, there was something about to bring that into reality. In 2001, The Fast and Furious hit theaters. Street racing was now mainstream. The film made $200 million worldwide, but its cultural impact went way beyond the box office. It turned tuner cars like the Toyota Supra, Mitsubishi Eclipse, and Mazda RX-7 into instant icons, and introduced millions of people to things like NOS, aftermarket body kits, and the underground street racing culture. Almost overnight, car customization became a youth movement. The tuner scene took off. Suddenly, it was common to see modified Hondas and Mitsubishis with massive wings, chrome wheels, booming subwoofers, and enough neon underglow to be seen from space. But trends never stay in one lane for long. By the mid-2000s, something else was about to return to the streets. This is the 2006 Dodge Charger RT. A dual exhaust 4-door rocking a 5.7-liter Hemi engine, putting out 340 horsepower and going from 0 to 60 in 6 seconds. Now, if you're like me, you definitely didn't own this car for your first car. Being in my mid to late teens, I definitely couldn't afford the $29,000 price tag that came with this when it was brand new. But thankfully, my older brother owns this car and let me borrow it for this video. And then maybe that was the case back then. You had an older sibling or some parents that let you borrow their sick ride to make you feel like you were ballin'. And if you went from a 90s car to this car, you definitely would feel like you were stepping into the future. We were done with the jelly bean-shaped cars of the 90s. This has the growl of a Hemi engine and the aggressive lines of the past. Oh, yes. It was retro-futurism, taking the soul of the 60s and stuffing it with 2000s tech. Automakers began looking backwards for inspiration, bringing classic shapes from the 60s and 70s into modern cars. Suddenly the roads were filled with vehicles that felt both nostalgic and futuristic at the same time. Cars like the Ford Mustang, the revived Pontiac GTO, and later the Dodge Challenger brought back the bold styling and muscle car attitude of earlier decades. Even everyday cars leaned into the trend. The quirky Chrysler PT Cruiser looked like a 1930s hot rod reimagined for the modern age, while the Chevy HHR followed the same nostalgic formula. It was almost like the auto industry had suddenly rediscovered its past and decided to remake it with modern horsepower, fuel injection, and airbags. Now you could choose your style: high-revving imports with neon lights, or old-school American muscle with a retro attitude. So seeing how this is the 2000s, this is the car I'll be driving around in, and I gotta say, it's pretty dope. Once you had a car, you were set. You could drive to the lake or meet your friends at the mall. All you had to do was give them a call, and back in the early 2000s, that was still done on a landline. Hello?
What's up?
What's up?
What's up? What's up?
What's up?
What's up? What's up? What's up?
Idiot. Hello? Although things were becoming more digital, it was still predominantly a physical world, so if you wanted to listen to your favorite music, you'd most likely head to your local record store, because in the early 2000s, CDs were huge. In the year 2000, CD sales peaked in the US with over 940 million CDs sold. Although file sharing was rising with Napster launching in 1999, physical media still ruled. Weekend destinations would include Best Buy, Sam Goody, FYE, Tower Records. It was still a time where music wasn't something you streamed, it was something you owned. And back in the age of CDs, the amount you had was bragging rights. I mean, you kind of had to own a lot of CDs because there were some that only held one or two good songs, so you had to constantly switch them to get to the ones you actually wanted to listen to. But thankfully, burning CDs was a pretty easy option. And you had little MP3 players like this one that made it pretty convenient, but they only held around 10 or 12 songs. But there was something about to revolutionize the whole music industry. It was on October 23rd, 2001 when Apple unveiled something that looked almost too good to be true.
We have something really exciting for you today. It's called iPod. The coolest thing about iPod, your entire music library fits in your pocket.
At the time, that promise sounded almost ridiculous. Most MP3 players could barely hold a few dozen songs, and carrying your music library usually meant lugging around binders of CDs or a skipping Discman. But the iPod changed everything. With the tiny hard drive and Apple's now iconic click wheel, it could store around 1,000 songs and let you scroll through them instantly. Your entire music collection, as Steve Jobs says it,
fits in your pocket.
But by the early 2000s, people had already started finding new ways to get music. Napster. Launched in 1999, Napster allowed millions of users to share MP3 files directly with each other online. Suddenly you could download almost any song you wanted for free. And that's assuming you had some pretty fast dial-up internet, or you're okay waiting 4 hours to download a song titled Metallica Enter Sandman just to find out it was some random techno remix. But the music industry wasn't laughing.
Legal troubles over copyright infringement aren't slowing down Napster. The song-swapping company is now in the top 50 list of most visited sites on the web, according to Media Metrics.
One of the loudest opponents was Metallica, whose drummer Lars Ulrich became the public face of the fight against digital piracy.
Napster hijacked our music without asking.
In 2000, the band filed a lawsuit against Napster, accusing the service of a massive copyright infringement.
Who do you think you are? I mean, just, because you, made us rich, you think you can get free stuff?
Money good. Napster
faster!
The case became one of the first major battles over online music, fans versus artists, free downloads versus ownership, and it forced the entire industry to confront a digital future it wasn't ready for. Napster was eventually shut down, but the genie was already out of the bottle, which is exactly where Apple stepped in. Instead of fighting the internet, Apple built a system around it, launching iTunes, where users could legally buy individual songs for 99 cents and load them straight onto their iPod. And just like that, the way people discovered, bought, and carried music would never be the same. It was a sign that times were changing.
We have made it to the mid-2000s, and naturally, I am christening it with an energy drink. Now, Red Bull might have been around since 1997, but by 2005, energy drinks were everywhere. Rockstar was founded in 2001, and Monster launched in 2002, so it was now common to see tall cans with brightly colored labels and promising focus, energy, and intensity. Now these weren't just drinks, they were branding, and Monster stood out by being louder and edgier, sponsoring motocross events, skateboarding competitions, and the UFC. So the same culture that was blinged out in Affliction was now fueling up with enough caffeine and touring throughout the day to get crunk.
By the late 2000s, Monster would become one of the largest energy drink brands in the world, eventually surpassing Red Bull in US sales. By 2006, energy drinks weren't a novelty anymore. They were part of the aesthetic. And although Monster, Red Bull, and Rockstar might have been the fuel, fast food was the ritual. The documentary Super Size Me, released in 2004, might have forced America to look at what it was eating and McDonald's phasing out the supersize option, but the early 2000s were still peak fast food culture. Taco Bell was in its golden era, and Chipotle, founded in 1993, was picking up speed. Faster than a restaurant and seen as better than your typical fast food, by 2006, Chipotle had gone public. Fresh ingredients and healthier options like having your burritos in a bowl was clearly working. There seemed to be more options than ever for everyone. Subway's Eat Fresh campaign, 7-Eleven Big Gulp culture, Mountain Dew dominance, and Doritos plus gaming synergy. In the 2000s, convenience was king. Energy in a can, lunch in 5 minutes, drive-thrus everywhere. It was fast and it felt efficient. But we didn't realize how much faster everything was about to get.
An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. These are not 3 separate devices, and we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
Suddenly, the entire world, music, maps, photos, the internet, was sitting in your pocket. Convenience had just gone from fast to instant. Now, the iPhone wasn't the first smartphone. There was the IBM Simon in 1993, the Nokia 9000 communicator in 1996, and the BlackBerry, famously nicknamed the Crackberry. But these weren't for everyone. They were tools for businessmen and tech enthusiasts. The iPhone changed all that. Suddenly, they made it for everybody, and they made the smartphone feel sleek, sexy, and cool. But some people didn't think it would work at all.
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine.
Almost overnight, people began switching from their Motorola Razr V3, their Nokia 3310, and their Blackberries to the iPhone. It was the beginning of full connectivity, but the real shift wasn't just the technology, it was the people. Because in the mid-2000s, the internet stopped being anonymous message boards and random websites and became you. Your profile, your photos, your music, your friends. And it all started with a website where everyone had a customizable page. MySpace. MySpace launched in 2003. It wasn't just a website, it was your digital identity. You spent hours learning basic HTML just to make your background sparkle and picking the perfect profile song to define your current mood. But MySpace came with a high-stakes social game, the top 8. Nothing ruined a friendship faster than moving someone from slot number 2 down to slot number 7. It was the first time our real-world relationships were publicly ranked by a digital list. By 2006, MySpace had become the most visited website in the United States with over 100 million users.
How many friends do you officially have now?
I think we're up to 175 million.
Bands use it to launch careers, friends use it to message each other after school, and for the first time, teenagers were curating a public version of their lives online. But while MySpace was loud, colorful, and chaotic, another platform was quietly spreading.
The 21-year-old Mark Zuckerberg turned his little web experiment into a very big business. It's called thefacebook.com.
Created in 2004 by Mark Zuckerberg in a Harvard dorm room, the Facebook started as a network just for college students.
Consider the site the 21st century version of the old paper-bound yearbook.
The design was simple: clean profiles, real names, and a running feed of updates about what your friends were doing. By 2006, Facebook opened to the public, and it began growing faster than anyone expected. We went from personalizing our own spaces to writing on each other's walls. It was the birth of the status update. We were telling the world what we were doing, where we were, and who we were with every hour of the day. We didn't realize it then, but we were handing over the keys to our privacy in exchange for a poke and a like.
The internet was no longer a place where we went to hide, it was a place where we went to be seen. But although our lives online were expanding and streaming videos straight from our pockets were getting closer, as the weekend approaches, Friday nights weren't spent scrolling, they were spent doing something else.
By the early 2000s, DVDs had taken over, so a typical Friday night might be heading to your local Blockbuster or Hollywood Video. You'd welcome in the weekend by wandering from aisle to aisle, judging movies by their covers and hoping the newest release wasn't already gone. By 2005, DVD sales and rentals brought in over $20 billion in the US alone. And you have to think, most people own their movie library on VHS already, but thanks to some pretty amazing promotional videos, it felt like DVD was the only way to watch movies.
And this is what happens when you watch DVD. It's a movie on a disc the size of a CD.
They were sharper than VHS, smaller, and you didn't have to rewind them, which was, I think, a major selling point why everyone switched from VHS to DVD. Plus, a lot of them had cool menu screens, behind the scenes, and director and actor commentary. This was now the industry standard. Entire stores were built around plastic cases and late fees. Be Kind Rewind turned into Don't Scratch the Disc. This is how we watch movies. Physical, limited, and intentional. There was a special feeling of arriving home after renting your top picks. DVDs in hand and snacks at the ready. Maybe you grabbed a new release or maybe something last minute just because the cover looked cool. But it wasn't always the movies themselves. It was the ritual of sitting down with family or friends, passing around popcorn and checking out the DVD extra features as the glow of the TV lit up the room. No algorithms, no endless scrolling, just a movie, and the people you chose to watch it with. But something was changing, quietly at first with Netflix mail-in rentals, but something even more instant was welcoming in the streaming age. Internet speeds were climbing, cameras were getting cheaper, and video files were getting smaller. In the year 2000, streaming a video online would seem almost impossible for most people, but just 5 years later, it was becoming normal. Video was leaving the shelf and was no longer celebrities and big-budget Hollywood. It was you. Thanks to YouTube launching in 2005, anyone with a camera could upload a clip of themselves and broadcast it to the entire world with a single click. Before YouTube, sharing video online was complicated and slow. Huge files, clunky websites, endless buffering, but YouTube made it simple. Click upload, share a link. The first video ever uploaded, me at the zoo, was only 18 seconds long. Today, it has 386 million views. Within a year, YouTube was hosting tens of millions of videos, and by 2006, Google bought the company for $1.65 billion.
Web giant Google will pay $1.6 billion to gobble up YouTube, a company created over dinner by 20-somethings Steve Chen and Chad Hurley.
What started as home videos and skate clips would eventually become something much bigger. The early days of YouTube were chaotic, unpredictable, and weirdly charming. Viral videos weren't polished productions. They were random moments filmed on cheap cameras and uploaded to the internet, where millions of people would suddenly see them.
YouTube's become a social phenomenon. Nearly half of all the videos viewed online are watched on YouTube.
Something that would be considered a personal home video like Charlie Bit My Finger was now a part of pop culture thanks to YouTube. Entire careers, communities, and even media companies would be built on this platform. It was the beginning of content creation. We weren't just making memories anymore, we were making uploads. It gave us a stage, but it also started the ticking clock of the attention economy. Before YouTube, you weren't thinking about going viral, you were just rounding up friends and family to watch your latest creation on the TV in the living room. Today, that innocence is gone. Now it's made for the algorithm. By the mid-2000s, the world was changing faster than most of us realized. Our food was faster, our phones were smarter, and the internet became something we shared our lives on. By the late 2000s, everything accelerated. What started as a slow shift became a surge. The internet wasn't just part of life anymore, it was leading it. With Facebook opening to the public in 2006, turning profiles into identity, to Twitter launching the same year, making communication instant and constant. YouTube continued to explode, giving anyone the power to create, share, and be seen. And with new iterations of the iPhone and the App Store following in 2008, suddenly we had apps to make our lives easier. Netflix began shifting to streaming in 2007, and by 2008, it was available on devices like the Xbox 360. Spotify launched in 2008, putting millions of songs a click away. And by 2010, Instagram arrived. Built for a world that was now always online, always sharing, and always watching. We went from logging on to never logging off, from waiting to expecting everything instantly, from living in the moment to capturing it. Everything was faster, louder, more connected. And without realizing it, we stepped into a world where we all became the celebrities, the rock stars, and now there was no going back. So that is my experience in living my life as a man from the 2000s. Now, it was a very interesting period of time, because if you're around my age, the most changes were happening. Being able to drive, turning into a legal adult, and being able to drink. And while at the same time, there was these big events like the 9/11 attacks, social media, and smartphones. And that's the reason why it feels so close to us, is because we grew up in it. We experienced it. We saw the transition happening, going through the heartbreak of the world going from this magical and mysterious place into the world it is today. Now, we're the only generation to go from a fully analog childhood to a fully digital adulthood. The last generation to remember life without the internet, while also being the first ones to become a part of it. Now, I want to hear your thoughts on this time period, and also your stories too. I love reading the stories that you guys have, because this is the 5th video in the series. I did one on the 1980s and also the 1990s. So if you do like this content, well, definitely check those videos out. And if you want to go farther back in history, well, I did one on the 1950s and also the 1890s. And these videos really only are made through your support. So if you could, definitely check out our fitness app called Buff that you can find on Google Play and the Apple App Store, because these videos are made by one man, which is me. So they're a ton of work. And just like the DVD special features, I want to take this time to go into a little bit of a behind the scenes look onto how these videos are made. So this is where it all starts, and it's going to be the writing. This is going to dictate the pacing, all the facts and information included in the video. And I really try to contain a bit of a fluid storyline in a sense, kind of going from each part of the decade seamlessly. So if that did work, well, it's because I spent a lot of time writing it, and I actually did have some help from my brother Hudson, who also runs the channel as well. You know, we both grew up in the 2000s, so we had a lot of memories and facts stored up there. And I think my brother is definitely a whiz when it comes to pop culture, music, movies, stuff like that. So he helped a lot in that sense. But once the writing's done, it's on to the shooting. So I'm just setting up a typical B-roll shot here where I'm sliding in to showcase the PS2 here. I got the slider, I got my B camera, the A7S III, got a couple lights. Pretty simple shot, but it just takes a while to set up just because I'm doing this on my own, and I have to kind of like make small adjustments and make sure it turns out, do a few takes, and maybe get some different angles too. So here is some of the gear that I used to shoot this video. Got some lights with some soft boxes, some C-stands. I got sound, which is the Sennheiser MK-E600. I got a slider. I got my camera B here, which is the Sony a7S III, and my main camera, which I'm shooting on right now, is the FX3. And this, which I think is the most interesting piece of gear, it's gonna be the Canon GL1. Now, this came out in 1999. We bought it, I think, around 2000 to shoot some really low-budget movies. One of the more notable ones was Necrops Awaken. It was a full-length zombie movie we shot in 2001. And I actually used some of the footage in this video. So that was a lot of fun. But the problem was I had to figure out how to get this footage onto modern technology, because these are mini DV tapes, and I didn't really know how to use a FireWire. I heard it was pretty janky and hard to do. So thankfully, there's a pretty big community around these old cameras, and pretty much it's just using this power play here, and it stores the information on a mini SD card. You take that, drop it right into Premiere, and it made it extremely easy. So I was very thankful for that. And I think this camera kind of legitimized the whole video because it just gave that super authentic early 2000s look, and it's just a ton of fun shooting with. I'm gonna continue to shoot with this because I think it's just so great. So that's pretty much it. You know, it's taken a while to gather all this gear over time, and I think it kind of adds a pretty professional look to the video, and I'm always trying to push myself into make something that looks high budget and done by a big crew, even though it's just me. So I don't know, hopefully it turned out that way. But I had a lot of fun doing it. So now that I got the shooting done, I jump back here and start to edit. Now, I don't shoot everything at once and then come in and edit. I'll kind of shoot some stuff, come in and edit, go back to shoot, just to make sure it's looking good, it's in focus, it's lit right, the sound is correct. And that's what can be very time consuming as well, is because since it's just me doing all this, I really have to check and double check everything, and editing, much like everything else, is pretty time consuming, and I've been at this for years now. I really was shown how to edit by my brother Hudson, because he started back in the late 90s, early 2000s with mini DV tapes. So this is like a cakewalk compared to those times. So I have it pretty easy, but I really try my best to try to bring in emotion with the music, really working on getting better in After Effects and, you know, color correction and stuff like that. So there's a lot to it, but it is very fun because this is where it all comes to life. And once you kind of start seeing it come together, that can be very motivational. But this whole process took around 3 months or more to finally finish. And I gotta say, I'm very proud of it. And I really just hope you guys enjoyed this little short behind the scenes look. And I really just want to say thank you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting us. And until next time, stay buff.